Fabulous. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. So I'm Tim. I'm one of two co-founders of Nudge, and I've been helping people better understand and better manage their money for over 20 years now. And I think back to kind of what I've observed over that time. I think the biggest observation, the biggest trend has been just the increased complexity that we've seen in the world of money, in the world of pensions. I'm old enough to remember all sorts of things like pension simplification, which seems to have had the exact opposite effect. And what's interesting is a lot of that complexity has fallen to you guys. I was reminded of this yesterday, this morning, looking over the autumn statement. So this feels quite topical. So the full document is 120 pages, for those of you who haven't got that far in Google yet. I did a quick Control F, and there were 27 mentions of employer. So whether it's the national living wage, whether it's the NI cut, whether it's the changes to the state pension, pension pot for life. I don't know if people have heard of that phrase of, pot follows member. That's come up again. Big focus there around employers supporting employees with health and disability issues. The idea that employers should be helping integrate with job centre processes to report that people are actually looking for jobs. It's easy to say this stuff, particularly if you're flip-flopping and trying to work out how you get as many votes as possible for the general election. Less easy to actually implement this stuff. I feel for us all in this room. Money's complicated enough without these challenges, particularly to the backdrop that life's pretty expensive right now. Probably a lot of you got the same notification I did from Sky News this morning about the energy price cap going up from January as well. So, it's a complicated place. And, those examples I've given are just one country, just the UK. I know a lot of you have global responsibilities. If I think about our client base, there's about 300 employers we work with. Probably half of our contacts have this responsibility in more than one country. So what we're looking at here is not actually the slide which I was expecting, but never mind. I can use. Hopefully, you can use your imagination. So we run a piece of research called Nudgeonomics, which is where we track how people are using our service and how those trends are changing over across the world. And what this should have is some little numbers showing what the financial health score is in particular countries. And you're going to have to believe me here. But what we tend to find is, I guess the bits that stuck out for me is the UK. We're in a pretty poor place. It's getting slightly better. So it had a 2-point increase from last year, but we're in a pretty negative position. Generally, if we look east, things are a lot more positive. The financial health scores are a lot higher to the east. And if you look west, so particularly Latin America, but also places like Spain, the financial health scores are lower. And I think the bits that jump out to me there is that we're in a poor place here in the UK, but there has been an improvement. And I wonder if that's somehow linked to the unbounded confidence from the Chancellor yesterday. Who knows? I was in Ireland yesterday, and there was an announcement yesterday around the PRSI, which is an income tax in Ireland. So there's a big debate going on at the moment about what the retirement age, the state pension age should be in Ireland. And the compromise that the government have come up with is to keep it at 66, but they're increasing income taxes to achieve that. And that's created a lot of concern for people, and that's reflected in the score for Ireland. China was a big standout for me as well. You won't be able to see it, but take my word for it. One of the hot topics that people have been learning about in China, so we're now supporting people in China, in Chinese, one of the hot topics is around housing. So you might be aware they've had a bit of a kind of a boom and a bust with housing in China. 306, I think it's private developers, owe $360 billion. So a lot of people are kind of in negative equity in China, and that's creating concern. And so I think, regardless of the exact slide we're looking at, the message here is that it's varied. What people are learning about, their need for support changes a lot. And it's down to us as a reward team to provide that support. Now, whether that's our responsibility or whether we see it as an opportunity, we are in a unique place as an industry to help people. And I think that's probably what I love most about working in this industry for over 20 years now, and why I encourage young people to come into this industry, is that our jobs are about helping people and rewarding people. And I think that has never been more needed. We have an ebook which you can download from our stand after the sessions, number 35. And so what this demonstrates is that we've got the employee benefits to help, but generally speaking, people don't understand their benefits, and as a result, they're not using them. And there's lots of examples of this. Whether it's kind of single-figure engagement with particular benefits, EAP. What an amazing benefit, but people just aren't using it. And so this document, which I'm going to kind of summarize for you today, shows how it's a practical evidence-based guide showing how you can drive awareness of your benefits, drive understanding with your benefits, and encourage action. And perhaps unsurprisingly, with me being one of 2 co-founders of Nudge, a workplace financial education provider, it's how you can use financial education to actually do that. So I guess at a high level, there's 3 stages here. The first is around awareness. So it's about using data to understand people's needs, understand their ambitions, but also understand how they want to be engaged with. And some of the information from Octopus Money Coach was brilliant in that regard. And I think plays to this idea that you can't just chuck lots of mud at the wall. You need to really personalize the way that you support people. The second part is then around how you can use financial education to drive understanding of the benefits and indeed personal finance beyond. And then thirdly, it's around action. So how can you use those benefits? How can you use the tools to make sure the benefits are having their full impact? So I think in terms of that first stage around awareness, as we all know, communicating benefits is really tough. Particularly when we've learned now that people don't want their benefit communication, their benefit education, their financial education. They don't want it to feel like school. People want it to feel like real life. And in order to do that, you need to understand people's needs. And obviously, as the chart, as the world map showed earlier, people's needs are changing over time. I think the other challenge here, and I'm sorry to break this to you, but when it comes to money, people aren't honest. Particularly, we've got a lot of clients in the financial services space. People are anxious about saying what they're actually interested in. So, it's really important to find much more natural ways to really gauge what people's needs are, and use that to then communicate the benefits in an appropriate way. So an example that we've worked with, a tech client, they had a share plan that was going to it was vesting, so there was going to be a payout. They, meanwhile, saw that their people in the UK were worried about debt. Their people in India were really focused on investing, and their people in, I think it was Brazil, somewhere in Latin America, were really focused on retirement. So rather than just providing a generic communication about the share plan paying out, they linked the promotion of it to what they knew people's needs were. So in the UK, we can see you're worried about debt, interest rates are going to increase, that debt might increase. You've got this tool, this payout that can support with that. In India, we can see that people have been learning about investing. Here's a windfall to get you started on your investment journey. In Latin America, you've got this payout for your share plan. This can provide part of your retirement portfolio. What you're then able to do is overlay that personalization to people's preferred channels. So people getting that financial education support, whether it's in person, whether it's via WhatsApp, whether it's via email, or I was with PepsiCo over in Ireland, and they have an employee resource group built specifically around well-being. So it's around using those champions to really kind of take this messaging out. So the second stage then is around understanding. And yeah, as I alluded to at the beginning, money's complicated. Employee benefits, as a result, are also equally complicated. Whether it's type 1 national insurance or your annual allowance or your lifetime allowance or lifestyling, P11D, P60, moratorium, your average employee just doesn't understand this stuff. And then when you overlay your employer-specific messaging, it becomes really complicated. Now, the best example that I've seen of an employer using their financial education to support people's understanding is Delta, the US airline. So Delta use Nudge across all of their countries, and they have a fantastic benefit where they have an emergency savings product that is linked to payroll. And so there was a single central consistent communication that came from their CEO about the importance of saving and the opportunity that they recognized that they had as an employer to actually support that. So there was that consistent messaging, but then there was localization in terms of what was the specific plan that people were saving into, but also how was the credit mechanism working. So the way that Delta did this is the points that people earned through their interaction with financial education, they were translated to credit that equated to an employer contribution to the emergency savings plan. So in the US, kind of the simplest example, if you earned 1,000 points through financial education engagement, that equaled $1,000 that was paid into your emergency savings plan. Unsurprisingly, with that very strong incentive, they had amazing take-up of the product, in pretty quick time. For, I guess, other clients, there's lots of other ways that they're tailoring this communication, but the key here is that personalization is key. So onto the kind of the third stage. So you've understood your employees, you understand how they want to be communicated with, you've helped them understand how the specific benefits work. How do you actually drive action? And this, as I suggested a moment ago, this isn't just about chucking more mud at the wall. So the way that we think about this is based off something called the FOGG model, F-O-G-G, if anybody wanted to go researching it. So if you imagine a graph that has two axes to it, the first one is around motivation, with people having a very high motivation at the top, and the second axis is around the ease that it is for somebody to do something. So the absolute sweet spot is if you made it really easy for somebody to do something, and they're highly motivated to do it, if you send them a nudge, at that point, you're going to get action. Whereas if the motivation's less, or you've made it hard for people to do things, or potentially both, no matter how much you nudge people, they're going to struggle. So it's about thinking smart about how you can, really use different techniques to drive that motivation. So, for example, we use a lot of benchmarks, showing what people like you are learning about. This gamification that Delta used in terms of points, rewarding people, as Delta did as well. Situational bias, so thinking to what Octopus was saying about the life events. Somebody's just moved home, using that situational bias to tell them about their ability to buy discount vouchers to get cheap furniture for their new home. So it's about using all of these techniques to really drive motivation. And then from an ease perspective, in terms of reducing friction as much as possible, it's around things like single sign-on for integration, allowing people to access these tools really simply, allowing people to access their financial education through their WhatsApp, particularly if they're a frontline worker, they haven't got a computer at the end of the conveyor belt. So how do we make it really simple and seamless for them? That friction is also helped through recognizing accessibility differences as well. So one of our clients is the Royal National Institute for Blind. And as part of bringing them on board a couple of years ago, we had to embrace the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And so what this means is if people are partially sighted or hard of hearing or have mobility issues or perhaps neurological conditions, it's about making sure that those people can still engage with the services as easily as possible. You're removing those barriers. It's around making sure that the service is familiar. People are used to this idea of there being a feed of content. So you don't need a user guide on how to use Instagram. So how can we use that type of technique to make this as accessible as possible for people? So I guess bit of a spoiler alert for those of you who haven't yet seen the ebook, but there's lots of data in there that shows if you use this technique of really understanding people, using financial education to drive understanding of their benefits, and then using these techniques to drive action, the results really speak for themselves, whether it's around people's confidence, how they feel about money, through to actually how that's changing their behaviours and their take-up of their employee benefits. I'm keen to give a couple of minutes to questions. So I think to summary, your employee benefits have more value than perhaps people realise, particularly in tough times, as we seem to be in right now. Total reward statements, blanket comms, they don't work. You need this support to be personalised in time with individual people's needs. And I think financial education has a unique role supporting that, not only a very timely and relevant and valued benefit in its own right, but also as an essential underpin to make sure that you can promote and signpost and get maximum benefit from those other employee benefits at the same time. So the full report available from our stand, and we've got 3 minutes 15 for any questions.